We are here for episode 2 of Pit Box Social. Again, I'm joined by Tyler Hoffman, our co-host, and our special guest today is RJ Till of World Racing League, ACI Collision, and overall famous in Grassroots Motorsports. I probably just embarrassed him with that, but that's okay. So today we're going to cover a few topics. We're going to give you an update on what happened the last few weeks since we've been off, what's kind of gone on track, racing-wise. We're going to talk about some GTD, Porsche drama updates, maybe not so much drama, but just some updates. We're going to talk about Chase Elliott and his injury, and our boy Jordan Taylor getting his first NASCAR ride. And then we're going to go into RJ and his background with WRL. So we're going to kick it right off. I think Tyler was at VIR, I guess, 2 weekends ago.
That's right.
Yeah,
the old Kingpin boys ran up to VIR for their South course for 12 hours of fun in our Spec Miata. So I've never ran the South course before, and that uses the pit lane coming out of Oak Tree. And real tight. It was about 50 cars. We were doubled or tripled up in all the pit stalls. But overall, great event. Champ Car they ran a good show. And the car, lasted 12 hours. It just didn't do it happily. We got to the 3.5 hour mark, and I think we got a dud of a rebuilt gearbox, and we had fourth gear for the remaining 8-9 hours of the race. So
yeah, and I'm going to share South Course real quick.
Yeah,
because people might not know what South Course is. So
you've got the top of the so you've got the back straightaway there on the left, and then as you come up the first crest before roller coaster, that's you get on the brakes and hang a hard right. Double apex, hairpin to the right, by a downhill little straightaway here into an uphill braking zone, and this middle section where you're pointed there, turns 3 and 4, a ton of fun. A lot of momentum. You got elevation, so you come up a hill over a blind crest, and then you're flat out down the backside, brush the brakes into turn 4. And then as you come around turn 5, you re-enter the upper S's, and then you're flat out all the way until you get to get through South Bend into turn what they call turn 8 here, which is turn 11 on the full course. But a really, really fun technical track. It was great for a low horsepower car like a Miata. And
yeah.
To do it with one gear was good by all the drivers to really just work on rolling momentum, and luckily it was fourth gear that hung on. We lost third, and the whole track's in pretty much third and fourth. So we lost third before I even got in the car, and then we by the end of the race, first, second, we're all gone. I think we might have had reverse. I don't think fifth was there either, but it worked. So.
But with that, kind of as running the car, when do you make that call? Just be like, okay, guys, we're going to pack it up, or hey, as long as everyone's happy, we're just going to run it. Because even doing like coming to a stop in fourth and then getting the car going in fourth. Were you having to push the car, or were you able to get enough to get out of pit with fourth?
Well, so you have to stop at pit entry, right, to get the timer on the car. So once you could ride the clutch and keep it moving. So we'll see how much of a beating that took on the car. But to answer that question, which is a good question, at what point do you just save the equipment, right? And if the goal was to run, if we had another big race coming up in 2 weeks or a month or something for that car, then we probably would go ahead and park it. But since we're not planning on running that car again until August, it's like, well, we're already here. We showed up for a good time. Might as well make it a long timer. So we just kept running the car, and we weren't risking anything other than maybe the clutch, and the gearbox is already shot. So in my eyes, it wasn't gonna make anything worse.
Yeah, that's fair.
I was trying to use second gear, so because I got in right after it broke, and so I was going second to fourth, and probably halfway through my stint, I had a second getting real notchy. So I was worried about over revving the motor. So we just stopped using second. We just used fourth gear for the remaining 8 hours. So
stick it in gear and go.
Yeah, if you leave it in fourth and you let it roll and you don't try to do too much, then we were only 3 seconds slower a lap. The car was still competitive. all in all, it was okay to run it, in my opinion. But if we had something else coming up, or if we were risking more than just a gearbox, then we probably would have stuck it in the trailer and called it a day.
That makes sense. So RJ, with hearing that, I mean, I'm sure you've been racing for a good while now, and before you took over WRL, you were racing. Has that ever happened to you where you just lost a gearbox and just kept running, or what's your experience with that?
The point about gearboxes, surprisingly, that's one failure I don't think that we've suffered. I used to race E30s back in the day, and Champ Car specifically. Yeah. That's kind of where I got my start as well. We lost just about everything else. It actually, VIR brought to mind our first and only attempt at the 24 hours, which, Tyler, I think you've done that a couple times, the 24. I think we lost our first head gasket around like the 12th hour. Did a head gasket that lasted about 4 hours, did another head gasket. And then we lost the third head gasket somewhere, and we were losing power each time incrementally, or maybe exponentially.
This is a E30?
This is an E30, yeah. M20. Wow. So, if I never touch another M20 in my life, maybe that will change, but I'm still a little sore, literally and figuratively. But yeah, we got wound up blowing our third head gasket. My friend Zach was in the car. None of us had slept, and we pulled the car in. There was about an hour and a half left to go. We thought it was going to take us about 45 minutes to do the head gasket, so we just parked it. But I will say, having done that, that still haunts me, because I feel like we should have finished that race. So to the point of, trying to keep going with what you got, and that's just kind of that's always been for me a big part of endurance racing. As long as you're not a hazard to yourself or anybody else, keep going as long as you can.
So that whole thing. Okay. So you changed a head gasket, what, 2-3 times? And this is in one race?
This was in one race, yeah. So, and once you lose one, the chance that you've warped ahead, on a racetrack, you blow a head gasket, then you're going to have coolant where it's not supposed to be, oil where it's not supposed to be, and a lot of heat. We warped the head, and then I think we continued to warp the head. It was to the point where we were having to put some oil in each cylinder just to build enough compression to get it to start. So it was a mess.
So this, okay, I'm going to segue a little bit, because this is, I think this is something that's more distinct, maybe, or a difference between professional racing. So your VP series, your IMSA series, and maybe the grassroots. I feel like the passion behind finishing the race any way possible, because like if you went to an IMSA race and someone blew a motor or blew a head gasket, they're probably packing up. They're not even gonna try it in an endurance race. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like every time I'm at a WRL event or a Champ Car event, there's always someone underneath the car swapping a transmission, swapping a head gasket. Is that something that's more distinct in amateur endurance racing, or is it, they're just trying to get their money's worth to make sure they're track time, where on the professional side, maybe it's like, okay, well, we blew the motor.
I think it comes down to, like, what somebody's racing for. A lot of times in IMSA, you're points racing. If there's no real chance of you accumulating points, at that point, you're just putting time on the car. So, that would be another driver that I think is present in amateur racing. But in pro racing, that the cost of running those cars is so high. If there's no real, if you're in 17th, you're going to finish in 17th, unless you need, I'd have to go back and look at what regulations for each series are. But if you have to finish the race to collect points, obviously you'd want to do that. But, with a lot of the pro racing being shorter, I'd say the 24 hours of Daytona, you see heroic fixes, 12 hours of Sebring, you'll see the same 100%. Yeah. But yeah, for some of the shorter hour and a half long races, your chance of doing a repair like that are pretty slim. So.
Yeah, and also I think the new cars, like what we see in IMSA, they're so reliable, and they're all brand new. So I think that's a big factor there. Whereas you're racing cars that are 20 years old, you might have small issues. But
and I guess the level of prep too, right? I mean, they're probably swapping that stuff. They're swapping a head gasket. They're rebuilding an engine probably. Well, I guess if they can. Yeah, I know some of these motors are sealed once you get up into the pro level, but they're doing much more maintenance maybe than the amateur endurance guy. Not saying that some of these amateur guys are not spending a bunch of money on prep. I mean, you look at Moorhead, and his whole YouTube channel is dedicated to basically rebuilding these E46s between every race. I mean, he's doing probably more maintenance than anybody, and he has a great YouTube channel. If you ever want to just watch people rebuild stuff constantly, Chad does an incredible job.
That's what it takes to be successful, though. I mean, you've got to be on top of all of the maintenance, because it's, as much as some stuff may seem unnecessary where it's preventative. You've got a 50-second washer that will take you out of a 24-hour race, and it's like, damn, like you're winning the whole race, and then something silly breaks, and that's it. And you're either limping it along, or that's the weekend. So
yeah, very true.
Yeah, to that point, like an amateur build a homebrew race car, or even something that somebody like Chad is building. A lot of times, you're still reusing a streetcar alternator that was designed to probably average 1,500 RPM across its life. Where in a race car, you may be turning that up. So you look at a Porsche Cup car, or we just got a GT3R in the shop that we've been prepping for SRO with ACI. And that car, everything has redundancy. Anything that's prone to like vibration failure is solid state. It's just stuff that you're not going to have in a street car. You can take it to that level if you go, all standalone ECU and motorsports parts, but typically the value proposition isn't, you're better off swapping those parts out a couple times, but that's also where, you're making that choice, and, then that often leads to reliability issues.
Yeah, we're going to need you to come back on for when we talk. We're going to have a later episode about built versus bought. We're trying to figure out the best way to go about that, where, either do you build the car or do you just buy it? Because you can buy a factory race car now. I mean, you can go to your dealership and you can buy a factory race car. It's kind of a crazy thing, but I don't want to get sidetracked on that. What else happened past few weeks? We had SCCA majors at Road Atlanta, and then we had, I guess, Trans Am down at NOLA. Some great racing happened down there with everybody. I think at the SCCA majors, I think Porter Aiken won, if not podiumed both his races. Porter's a good friend of all of us. And then, but I don't think anything, I mean, it rained at the majors, which is always interesting. It dices up things a lot.
Yeah, we also had the VP Challenge Series down at Sebring. So shout out to our boy Pat Wilmot on collecting the podium down there.
After his interesting Daytona debut, we'll have to have him on to explore Daytona, and then also now, I guess, getting back onto the podium down at Sebring. So we'll have him on maybe after another few podiums. We'll get him on here. So Pat, I hope you're listening. And then Tyler, you had on here the Mint 400, which is an off-road race, correct?
That is correct. That's it's a desert race that I believe it starts and finishes in Vegas.
Okay, cool.
But we've got some buddies that have done that, and our buddy Austin Bowen, who was supposed to do that, unfortunately got injured in a snowboarding accident, actually, and wasn't able to do it.
That's a great segue.
So, yeah, so
well, we can make a great
I'm sure he's itching to get back there next year, but
yeah. Well, we'll segue with that injury into another injury that's kind of been all over the motorsports world. Is Chase Elliott in the NASCAR series, I think, also hurt himself snowboarding. If I'm not incorrect there.
That is correct. I believe he broke his tibia, or fractured his tib.
His tibia, and that's the lower part of the leg. If our anatomy people are not up to date on their bone structure of your body, can't really do much if you've broken the bottom of your leg. But exciting news with that is our good friend Jordan Taylor of Corvette Racing is getting his NASCAR debut. And if you don't know Jordan, and if you haven't followed him on social media, Rodney Sandstorm is living his dream at COTA coming up. I can't wait to see what Jordan does in the NASCAR, or Rodney does in the NASCAR. I really hope he goes full Rodney, mullet, the DuPont jacket, the whole nine. That might be the best thing for NASCAR since NASCAR, to be honest, from a social media standpoint. I think other than that, we're just excited to see that happen. So really what we have here today, we have our special guest, RJ Till. RJ works for World Racing League. He also works for ACI, who's a motorsport shop up in Chattanooga. And they handle all of my stuff. They handle they have a shop here at Road Atlanta, so we're extremely familiar with them. They help us transport down to Sebring, to VIR, to Barber, walk wherever we want to go. They have quite the fleet to get us there. And I think they're running, I think as RJ just mentioned, they're running SRO this year. They're running Porsche Cup Challenge as well. Not Cup Challenge, Porsche Cup, Porsche Carrera Cup. And then, of course, running WRL, the series. Y'all aren't running a car in WRL this year, correct?
So Kurt, who's the owner of the series, had run a car, Porsche Club Sport in WRL a little bit in the past couple of years. But they've just become so busy with their, pro racing sort of schedule. And Kurt's moving into SRO this year, doing the GT4 America Series and awesome. I believe some of the endurance races. So, Kurt also started in World Racing League before he owned it or owned any part of it. Oh, and he's kind of, getting into back into these longer format endurance, in races with multiple drivers and driver changes, fuel stops, that sort of thing that he kind of started with. So that'll be kind of fun to see.
Got it. So I want to start, RJ, give us your background in motorsports, cars. Were you born into it? Did you learn to love it? We'd love to hear your background. So everyone that's following WRL or is new to it, maybe can get an idea of the passion behind it.
Yeah, I think I took a little bit of a unique path into motorsports. My family was never super big into it. My grandfather watched a lot of NASCAR, so I grew up, watching NASCAR and lining up my Hot Wheels at their house when I was coming up. But
of course,
kind of got into that. And what I think brought me into racing initially was just watching like Speed Vision as a kid, and then always finding that was what I always wound up finding on the TV. And then of course, video games came later, but that was a huge part of it as well for me, was the Gran Turismo series and the Forza series, and just watching all this. Then I kind of became aware of, karting and what that looks like, and, competitive karting. And so I brought that to my parents when, I don't know, I was probably about 10 or 11 years old. And I was like, hey, I want to go-kart. I want to race go-karts. And they're like, no, you'll tear up the yard. And they just didn't know what I was talking about. So that kind of, nothing really moved for me there beyond the video game thing till after college. And then I kind of got into sim racing. Started doing autocross, and at that point didn't really think, to me, the sim racing was probably as close as I was ever going to get to a real racetrack and wheel-to-wheel racing. And then that's actually where like Champ Car comes in. And I was autocrossing in Chattanooga, and all of a sudden I see this E30 race car, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I'm drooling all over the thing. I'd never really been to a racetrack at that point. This was probably in like 2013. Just watched a lot of racing on TV. And just started crawling all over this thing. Can I sit in it? Whatever. And wound up being the Chattanooga Torn Wagon guys that are, racing WRL. And so I went over there and started working. It was Phil Fitzmaurice's car. And I went over there and would work on it like every day. And then one day I showed up and my name was on the car. And they're like, you're driving? I was like, what?
You got the fever.
Yeah. So NCM, it was the first race they ever held there with Champ Car, West Course. And it was pretty crazy to me. And one of the reasons why I'm such a big why I love sim racing so much, and I'm always supporting its growth. But got right in the car, and probably within 20 minutes was comfortable and was, right there with the guys. And then actually when we went back to NCM that next year, which was, I think, my third or fourth race at that point, we wound up winning at NCM. So that's I haven't unfortunately I haven't been back there since then, but good racetrack, and I enjoyed it. So kind of did that, and to try to keep it as short as possible. Got into Champ Car racing, realized really quickly even racing at that level can be expensive. So I did a ton of volunteering with Champ Car, and I would go work and sleep in a tent and, work all day Sunday, get in the car, drive home from VIR. I think 3 years in a row, I worked the 24 hours of VIR as a marshal. And then I'd sleep in a tent and be, wet and miserable and cold. And then get in the car, drive home, and not be very productive on Monday when I got back in the office when I was working a regular day job. So I'd do that, and then I'd exchange all my chump bucks from working to drive. So I wasn't really exchanging a lot of cash at that point. I was just working all the races. So at that point, I was super hungry for motorsports. I knew I just wanted to be involved in it. Became aware that Kurt Swearingen was starting to get into like some PCA racing. Saw pictures of cars and stuff. So that's about the time when I started just begging him to let me come sweep the floors or whatever I could do at that point. And he wound up bringing me on eventually as a parts guy in one of his body shops. And so I worked as a parts guy and I was not a very good parts guy, but I did the best I could.
At least you're self-aware.
Yeah. I got a lot of friendly encouragement from the guys there. Anyway, the pro racing thing started growing for Kurt, started working for him. And at that time, he also owned the Southeast region of World Racing League. So I kind of came on and I told him, to get involved. I was like, well, like I said, I was kind of hungry at the time and literally. And so I told him, hey, I can, he was like, what do you need in WRL? He's like, man, I really need like a marketing media photographer guy. I'm like, oh man, that's great. I can be a photographer. And so I went and bought, and bought a camera at Best Buy, the cheapest one where I could do a shutter, and then I stood on the side of the interstate and practiced taking photos of cars until I got the blurry shots down. And then I went and
I'm sure people loved seeing you on the side of the road taking photos of
I'm sure there were a couple people who were like, yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't get a visit from your local PD. Like, why are you standing on the side of the road taking photos? But hey, you got to get it done.
That's creative. I like that.
Yeah, well, it worked. I was like, where can I do this? I can't be at Road Atlanta every day. So, but I'll still say I never became an excellent photographer, but I was good enough to be passable at that time. So kind of started doing the marketing stuff. I was working for Joey Todd also, kind of volunteering my time to help grow that side of the business since we were running the Southeast. And then as time went on, I just, we grew and people had to kind of grow into the roles. And I saw a couple that I thought I could do. And, there was a long period of time where we were a 3 or 4 person team in race control and, being race director and chief steward and, referee or whatever you want to call it, just kind of all of these different things, which was extremely hectic. But, we started getting a lot of growth and support, and we kind of saw the opportunity to kind of mesh the two series together, the Midwest and the Eastern, that were still all WRL, but being run by different people. There was, a lack of consistency in some places, nothing that anybody was necessarily doing wrong. But when you have 2 completely different staffs trying to operate under the same rule book, you're going to get some disparities, and that's almost impossible to avoid. That became a really important part of WRL for us kind of at that point. We were like, we're going to have the same people at every event, the same equipment, everything's going to, we used to fly. We used to ship all of our equipment back and forth between the 2 regions, like the timing equipment. It was super expensive. So just learning our way through some things like that. And then kind of after we purchased it, got everything kind of stabilized. And we fortunately saw a good bit of growth. A lot of people who supported WRL in the past came on and continued to support in a big way. And so we just, having raced and been in the pro paddocks and worked for ACI as a mechanic for a couple of years while I was doing WRL, I kind of got to see both sides of it. So I still feel like today, when we do something, I'm always keeping in mind, what are the guys going to have to do? Like, we make them tear down this car, or we make them go back on the dyno at this time or whatever. I just try to keep it user friendly for everybody. And I think having that perspective of, racing myself at a very grassroots level to being in the pro paddock, as kind of like team manager for ACI when we were doing Carrera Cup, and then kind of doing every role within WRL, and just trying to look at it from the competitor side and making things easy. Certainly not perfect or anything like that, but we always try to take feedback and work from that. So yeah, that's essentially how I got here.
That's cool. I didn't realize that you had like experience marshaling with Champ Car before WRL too. Yeah,
I did a lot of it. For me, it was just another way to be at the racetrack. Like, that's how hungry for it I was. And, I graduated from UTC here in Chattanooga, where I still live. But everybody has that kind of dream in their head, like, oh, I'm going to graduate and find this great job. And, I'm going to buy myself a D6R and go crazy racing. That didn't work that way. So I realized really quickly, if I didn't like the things I was doing, so that kind of drove the motivation to get into something I was passionate about.
That's awesome. And then when did Kurt take over the Southeast, or when did you guys take over the Southeast?
So I think the Southeast he took over in about 2015, around the end of 2015. I think there was 1 or 2 races hosted. That's about when I got involved also. So I think I was at our first event there at Road Atlanta, and I actually came as a photographer, but it turned out there was only like 3 pit marshals and I had to be one of those and the photographer. So now things have changed a lot, and that was really, we were running the whole thing with 5 or 6 people. Of course, we had fewer cars. Now we're in the 20s staff wise for every event.
Yeah, I mean, you guys put on a great show. We've been consistently in the series, at least from 20 to 22, and you guys have done an absolute fabulous job. And from what I've seen from, I did a little bit in the series in like 2015, 2016. So when you guys first got involved, we did the race at AMP and a couple others. But it's really amazing when you look back and you see, what the cars were, back 10 years ago, 15 or 10 years ago. And then you go to 2020 when it was all the factory production cars started coming in. And then what it is now is just, it's a GS field pretty much. So it's really amazing what you guys have done.
Yeah. Has that?
Go ahead.
Nope. No, I just on Tyler's point, the cars have gone from built to bought a little bit. But has that changed anything on your side? Like, have you, on the officiating and on the business side, have you seen anything? Has that improved the series, being able to just go and buy the factory Porsche or the factory BMW, or has it made it harder does it become a pay to play?
So that's a really interesting question, and one that pops up all the time. I kind of just explained to you my background, which I think gives a little perspective as to kind of where my head's at typically. You have to say that the growth of the GTO class, which has been consistently our largest class of racing, where those factory built cars tend to race, that has grown very rapidly, faster than a lot of the other classes have. But those other classes have grown as well. So I think the way that I view it is, I'm very much about accessibility and value for money, and for all the reasons that I just explained of how I got into the sport. I want to share that with people, but I was also looking for myself when we were racing in Champ Car. I was like, I want a little bit more compliance, and there's nothing wrong with Champ Car. I still very much enjoy that. I plan on racing there some this year as I get back into racing, which I'm excited about. But nice. It's just, I was looking for something more where you're balancing the cars to where we have extremely competitive racing, and let the drivers kind of do the talking, where you don't have these outlier builds or loopholes and things like that. So that kind of brought all of these, I think the compliance and the level playing field and how close these races tend to be started bringing more people that were more competitive, and a lot of industry people started showing up. We're starting to have a lot of shops that are supporting customers, bringing customers to WRL to get them ready for the next level, which is another thing that, was really important to me. But no, I don't think it's become a pay to play sort of situation, because we still do have the general production classes. GP2 at Barber this last weekend, we had a race come down to, I think, 15 seconds at the end. And that was a spec E46, out of the box, pretty much spec E46 racing, a pretty highly prepared ASM S2000 for the win. And ASM is, very popular in grid life, and very, very performant there. So to see a team like that, that's really almost dominant in another series, come to WRL, race another very competitive team that races with us, which was Harrison Motorsports, and to see them, in very different cars running, within hundredths of a second on lap time, lap after lap. And I really don't think the gap of that 30 seconds expanded or contracted much across the whole race. So, to that point, I think the level of competition that you're going to see and the experience that you get, you can have that in a home built race car, or you can have that in a factory Porsche or BMW. And actually for Barber, when we came into this event, we had more cars registered in GP1 than we did for GTO, which is the first time that's ever happened. So we had a 21 car GP1 field, which, again, was extremely competitive. Anytime you have that many cars racing for a single podium, it's going to come down to the wire, and that's another one that finished on the same lap. So that's kind of what I'm trying to promote. And I think if you look at other series, even people like to, there's always this picture of Texas World Speedway that pops up on the WRL Racers group from, 8 or 10 years ago. And, it looks very much like what Champ Car even looked like a couple years ago. You go to a Champ Car race today, there's a lot newer cars, and part of that's just time. Like I mentioned with the E30, you know, there's only so many heads that aren't warped for an M20 engine. You know, there used to be Triumphs that raced in WRL and stuff like that. It's just becoming very hard to campaign those types of cars. So these newer cars are coming into the fold, the E46s, stuff like that. And, you know, when I kind of got into champ car racing, an E46 was like, man, that's unobtainium. It's like this super high end fancy race car. Well, now an E46, 330, or even M3 race cars, you know, you can be had for the 20s or 30s as something that's turnkey and ready to go. So yeah, you know, I think we've tried not to really, you know, I'm not trying to keep people from spending money necessarily, especially in GTO where there's less regulations, but in the general production classes, there's still things that are, you know, there's still a cost control component to the rules. We're still trying to limit that stuff. And then, you know, even in GTO, you can buy one of these factory built race cars that's maybe aged out. Like, for example, a 981 Club Sport won on Saturday at Barber. And again, a very competitive field. The car just has a little bit of a development. They've done a wing, they've done a splitter, different shock package, things like that. So you still have the ability to take an older factory built race car that are kind of don't have too many places left to race, do some modifications, and then compete against, you know, your brand new Supras and M4s and stuff like that. And that variety and ability to build and, you know, engineer stuff is really important to me.
Do you think it comes down to preference on the drivers? Like, hey, I want to be in a new car, or hey, we can build, you know, a lower class car and be more competitive. Does that come into play? Like, you know, maybe just some personal preference on the drivers that you've talked to?
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with the guys at 94 Motorsports in GP1 at Barber, and they're running a C5 Corvette with a sequential Bosch Motorsport ABS, a bunch of aero, 6-piston brakes. It's carrying a lot of modifiers. And when you look at it on paper with the power that the car is able to make because of all these modifiers it's taking, again, part of the cost control, if you can do all those things, but, you know, you're going to pay a weight penalty for it. The car was right there with much more simple, you know, E46 M3 builds in terms of lap time. And when I talked to them, you know, I was like, we had talked when the car came through tech, hey, this might be a good GTO car because of how much you're having to detune the car because of the modifier you're taking, you know, 0.6 for a sequential, 0.6 for Motorsports ABS, because those are expensive components. So expensive components that are complex, not easy for everybody. And they do have a performance advantage. So why'd you go this route? And they just said they thought that the GP1 field is where they wanted to be. It was extremely competitive. There were some stalwarts like PC Racing and Moorhead, and they just wanted to kind of take the fight to them. And that to me is super exciting. Yeah. And to see people like that, and that's what we're trying to attract, are people who are really competitive. You know, everybody has different motivations in motorsports. There's plenty of people that are there to have fun, and you can come and just have fun in WRL, but also, you know, we really promote this friendly competitive atmosphere that I think attracts these teams that, you know, want to go out and challenge themselves. They're not necessarily looking for the easy route. They're looking for the most challenging route and a place where they think they have, you know, good, fair competition. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, every time I come to a WRL race, the paddock has a great feel to it. Like it's just one of these. I mean, you go to a pro race and it's exciting to see all the pro teams and everything. But like the fact that, I mean, listen, I'm nosy. I walk into everyone's pit stall. I'm like, what are you doing? What you got in there? And, you know, and then even between the teams, I mean, I love, not that I love people breaking down, but I love that on y'all's app, we have like that chat feature where it's like, who has a transmission? And probably within an hour or two, my guess is someone has the part they need if something breaks. Oh, yeah. And I think that have you seen, and Tyler being a competitor, is that part of the attraction and part of people why they stay? Because I mean, you have some teams that, I mean, this is the only thing they do. I mean, they are loyal to this group. You know, there's Champ Car, there's Lucky Dog, there's, you know, all these other organizations, but it seems like you have such a core following going on. But is the paddock and the camaraderie part of that? You know, from a competitor standpoint, Tyler, what do you see?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you naturally, you naturally kind of bond with the guys that are running the same cars. So like when we were running the 981 Club Sport or even the 718, we were good buddies with Mark Martin and the guys at WTW Racing, and we would share parts and share some information and we cheer each other on, and so you have a natural camaraderie. And like even with the BMW teams, we all everybody, the ACP guys are great. Love Tim Myers and his program. But yeah, I mean, there's a natural camaraderie in the paddock that has a different feel than like IMSA does. So like when racing in IMSA, like, everything's behind curtains. You might get a head nod from a competitor, but WRL, it's much more like walking by someone, you're probably going to get a high five, or it's definitely a more welcoming feel. And everyone's there to compete and do well, but everyone's also there to have fun. So it's just a very nice homely feeling when racing in WRL.
And RJ, is that something y'all have really kind of like? Is that something y'all strive for? I mean, I'm assuming you'd want that feeling in the paddock. Is that something y'all have worked on, or has that changed over the years?
I think that's just the kind of culture that we try to promote, and we try to be involved with those issues. And I did an alignment 2 years ago on a competitor's car that needed to use our shop at Road Atlanta. And they needed some help using the strings. And then I wound up doing an alignment and, was working till like 11 o'clock at night. So nobody get any ideas. I really don't want to do that again. But again, I'm willing to go out of my way to help people. I see that from everybody else. And it almost seems like it comes naturally. I mean, it'd be nice to take credit for that, but I don't think I can. I just think we have a really good group of people that race with us. And we've kind of, continue to attract very similar type of people who are, like Tyler said, extremely competitive, but still willing to do whatever it takes to make sure everybody else has a good time. And I think promoting that sort of culture is what, keeps the racing on track clean, keeps everybody in the paddock, amenable to each other and friendly. And just to see how many, friendships, businesses, all these things that have kind of come as a result of the WRL paddock is one of the things that I find really rewarding. Just to see these people doing other things together or starting businesses together, all these things. And see that kind of fostered in the WRL paddock is awesome.
I will say these races are so hard too. Like to get a car to run 8 hours straight and not have any mishaps. Like there is definitely a pay it forward where it's like if somebody needs something, like give them what you got, because there's going to be a day when you need it. You need something back from them. So I mean that's where it is. It's just so the races in general are just super competitive, and it's very hard to get the car to last. And so it's good to have friends in the paddock.
One thing that I guess maybe if some people are new to WRL or new to amateur endurance racing, y'all promote it's a no contact series. RJ, can you explain that? Because contact happens. I mean, with racing incidents happen, but y'all promote this no contact, race, or forget how you phrase it, but it's like I'd say no contact racing. Can you kind of just go through that real quick for maybe someone's new to WRL or endurance racing?
Yeah. So, that's a critical part. Just like Tyler said, you're going to race 8 hours. So, if you're driving in such a way that you're exposing yourself to risk constantly, all of racing and performance driving is like calculated risk taking. But you have to know when to dial that back, and you've got to be smart about how you apply that. Multi-class racing doesn't necessarily invite, but you're having to make a lot more of those decisions than you're doing it over 8 hours. So the amount of exposure to passing and being passed is extremely high. So that's why you have to be, for those thousands and thousands of passes that a car may be subjecting itself to over the course of just one race, let alone two, and then you add Friday, we have to be extremely tough on contact. Like you said, it doesn't mean contact won't happen. We do kind of have some escalation for something like incidental contact, which is contact that's incidental to close racing, which might be a mirror touch or something like that. But, if you've put yourself in a situation, you've made a decision, you're the overtaking car, which often has the most vision. If you've put yourself in a situation where you don't have an out, and, I know Tyler can speak to this. I've seen you drive. I've seen your video. I've done a lot of endurance racing. You need to take those chances. You need to put pressure on cars. You are racing, but you have to leave yourself an out. So when somebody makes a choice to go into a situation without leaving themselves an out, or just completely misread it, or, again, kind of disregard that other car's right to racing room, then, we're going to penalize you extremely hard. And that's kind of been something we've been afforded because of our popularity, is we've just not been afraid to tell people, you're done for the day, or you're done for the weekend, or, you're suspended for a number of races. And we've had quite a few people come to us after something like a probation or suspension and say, this is the best thing you've ever done for me. And I won't name any names, but there's also some people who race professionally who said it had a dramatic effect on their performance, even in pro racing, because they were approaching situations differently. So that's something that we're trying to promote. Again, it's not something we can completely avoid, but if you look at this Barber event that we just had, it was one of the cleanest races we've ever had. We had almost a full field of 55 cars. You guys have both driven Barber. Barber is a challenging track, especially multi-class racing. There's a lot of downhill braking zones, areas that suddenly become single file, like the kink on the back straight. So stuff like that. So we've been overwhelmed and impressed with the way that people behave on track, for the most part. And I think a big, any series that sees rapid growth is going to have some struggles in that department, because you have such a large volume of drivers coming into the series that are coming from other places. And when it's that competitive, driving an IMSA or something like that, occasionally you will use your car to send a message, or to, a bump and run sort of situation. And while it's frowned upon, it is part of that type of racing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But taking that sort of behavior and bringing it to WRL, where you're racing for 8 hours, again, in an amateur series with varied skill levels and abilities and budgets and everything else, there really isn't room for that. So we've had to program out some of that sprint racing mentality, some of that pro racing mentality, and a lot of the pro guys that come to race with us. And it's just adapting to your environment, which is something that anybody who's a good race car driver is going to have to do, whether it's a broken car or a different series rule set, weather conditions. It's no different than any of those things. So that's why we take all that extremely seriously. And I think we've seen a really good response from competitors through that sort of campaign.
No, I think that's great. And to the point, different skill levels, y'all do not require, as a lot of the amateur endurance race series don't require a race license. Where if you go to PCA or a BMW or an SCCA or a NASA, they do require a race license. What's the thought behind that? Basically, I'm an HPD driver. Hey, I want to go racing. I'll just go.
So that mentality, that part of our rule book, where you can come in with with experience in another series like Champ Car, or Lemons, or as a advanced or instructor level driver in a DE that has references and resume, all that stuff. If you're coming into WRL without a license, we do take additional measures to make sure that you're good. We're watching you on Friday. You have to be in the car. You come in on probation. So there are a lot of things that we look at, and we do turn people away when they come to us. But a lot of times I'll tell people, hey, depending on their experience, sometimes I'll say, hey, the quickest way for you to get into WRL would be, I'd like to see you go do a couple more DEs, do a 3-day race school, and then come out and check us out. So I will sometimes recommend a race school if it's the right person the right thing for someone to do based on their experience, to get to where we're comfortable with having them, be on watch for Friday to then approve them for our race on Saturday and Sunday. But that's something that was super appealing to me from the beginning about WRL, and something that Joey Todd kind of started. And I can't speak for him because I don't know what his motivation is, but my experience recently, and this might be an unpopular opinion, is just that a lot of some of these schools and sanctioning bodies, not to name any names, but I don't know that it's being taken as seriously as it was in the past. And I think there's been a propensity to fast track people through some of these schools. So when we see people that have just come out of a school or have done kind of the fastest approach to getting a license, they're certainly not as well prepared as somebody who's done 30 DE days and is an instructor and has not only driven, but also helped teach people to drive. Even though they don't have a tremendous amount of wheel-to-wheel racing experience, that's stuff that gets picked up pretty quickly. And even passing in a DE, got to kind of, there's similar things like where you're going
to
catch the
navigate,
car, how you're going to accelerate. You know, you're not building every part of racecraft, but you are learning how to coexist on a racetrack with other cars, especially in open passing sessions, which is one of the things we require to come in if you're coming out of DE. Then if you look at somebody who came from Champ Car, and like myself, I know Tyler, you did a lot of Champ Car over years, you know, you have to learn how to approach somebody, because at Champ Car, they only require a driver's license. Again, an excellent thing. And one of the only reasons I was ever able to go wheel-to-wheel racing in the first place. But you're going to see a lot more variability. So then you learn to read the cars around you. Your awareness level needs to be super high. So some of the cleanest drivers that we have by the numbers, you know, because we track every single incident that happens with us, are guys that come out of Champ Car, Lemons, and HPDE. Overwhelmingly.
I've seen the spreadsheet. That spreadsheet's impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all, you keep track of everything. And I think that's something that more orgs need to do, and hopefully they're doing it. But the fact that you can go back,
I got a call from Bill Strong, who I still talk to all the Champ Car guys a lot, but I got a call from Bill Strong, and he was like, "Hey, how does your live log work?" So we kind of talked through it, and so now they're using a similar version of that spreadsheet that we're using. You know, because again, I want to help support Champ Car, because I think it's a feeder for us, and we want to be a feeder for the top level, and it's important for everybody to work together and there to be a clear path. Because like my friend Zach Mortimer that I raced with for a long time, who's local here to me, Chattanooga Touring Wagon guy, he said when he started racing in NASA in like 2008, 2009, or he was trying to get on a racetrack, he couldn't figure it out. You know, there was no real clear path. You know, he called and talked to some people. Nobody could really give him an answer. So he went and started doing autocross, and then eventually he found NASA, but he was struggling to work his way through SCCA. And I know a lot of that stuff's been fixed in recent years, but I think it's never been more approachable and accessible than it is now, in terms of being able to jump into a Lemons race or a Champ Car race with no experience. You know, all you really need to have is the desire, and you can get out there and go racing, which I think is awesome.
Definitely. And to your point, I mean, it's hard to replace time in the seat, right? You know, if you got somebody that's got 30 DE days, or, you know, talking about 10 weekends there, or 15 weekends, but if you've got someone with that much time in the car on track, it's hard to, you know, 3 days out of school isn't gonna get you to where that guy at the DE has, you know, and especially have worked, you know, a number of schools. The schools are great, and it's a great starting point, but rarely does anyone come out of a school, out of a 2 or 3 day school, that has no experience, that they're ready then to go wheel to wheel racing. Yeah. So that's a good point too, is, you know, how the DE ladder is a good method to get in behind the wheel of a race car in a race. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, unfortunately,
we've seen some guys like G Harvey come up kind of through DCRA, being involved in that, and going from DE, jumping in a race car, and then being, you know, I think that he had the fast lap in the car at Road Atlanta, from what I understand. Nice. You know, even with some really fast drivers in the car with him. So we continually see that. So that's one of the reasons why that is still part of the rule book, and we still support it, is there's just direct correlation between people with that sort of budget endurance race series experience and people that are coming out of DEs, because in a DE, your only job is not to hit anything. That's another thing I like to point out. You know, that's your only job. Put the car back on the trailer the way you brought it. And some people might be driving that car back home, as I used to do. So you've got to really pay attention to what you're doing. But you know, when we look at that, the people kind of most likely to cause contact are people with IMSA FIA licenses. A lot of that contact isn't necessarily egregious. But,
look away, Tyler.
Yeah. But it's just the numbers don't lie. And we try to drive everything we do with data, whether it's, you know, driver conduct rules, tech items. You know, we black box cars continuously. We're always looking at performance data. So everything that we do is driven by numbers. So if I see something that's working, even if it's contra to how other series do it or how it's always been done, which, you know, is something you hear a lot, we've just followed the numbers. We've followed the feedback, and, you know, that's led us in some different directions than what others are doing.
That's cool.
I got to tell you, one of the most, well, let me backtrack. You said you were like, oh, I'm not going to call out anybody. And I'm not going to call out anybody either on like the moving people through the ranks too quick. But there is a particular organization that we all know. It's a German brand. They have a very large club. But they would move people. I remember this when I started, depending on what you brought. So if you brought the high end of the vehicle range, you were automatically put in the upper classes, even if you didn't have the experience. But because you brought the fast car, you were put up. Versus someone like Chin. We know everyone here knows Mark and Maria and the whole team. They don't really care what you bring. It's based on you and your experience and all that. You know what I mean? Going through their program, I mean, it's to get into that red level group, that upper level group, you got to take a test. You got to, basically have not favor in the paddock, but yeah, if you've hit somebody, you're not going there. Or if you've had too many offs, or you've had X, Y, and Z. So the fact that there's some kind of structure, and even SCCA and NASA, in order to go to time trials, even, which is not wheel-to-wheel racing, you got to go up through HPD. You got to get all through their HPD program. It doesn't matter what you brought. So I'm glad that you have some kind of structure, and it also it helps you on liability too. So that's always a good thing. But yeah,
and to be like super clear, I think it's very important that all these different series offer something different. There's more choices than there's ever been to go racing now. But that's all super important to keeping the sport going. It's all about getting bodies in seats and getting people interested. That's one of the reasons why we're starting to add spectators. It's just to bring more people into the sport. How many eyes can we get on it? You see, NASCAR going to more road courses. You've seen the huge attendance at the Rolex 24. Racing has momentum now. And it's how do we keep people involved? How do we get people interested? And how do we just keep growing the sport? And that extends beyond World Racing League. That goes to everybody. So even when I, say something like about any particular organization, we've just chosen to do things a little bit different. I hope, I've learned a lot from everything that I've ever seen, whether it was PCA or SCCA. Everywhere I've gone, I've learned something, and everybody does something right. But I think the approach that we have is maybe more different than a lot of the other organizations that are out there. But we have, our team is comprised of a lot of people with a ton of experience, Jim Davis and Kyle Shields and Steve DeBreck that, have been around everything, have been racing forever, bringing in some of those people with more experience, but still having a core, very young team of people running the series. Something that I think is a little bit similar to, Grid Life, which is another series that I have a lot of respect for because they've done a lot of things differently. I think we're just trying to bring something different and do things a little bit differently. And I think a lot of people have responded to it, and hopefully it makes everybody better. So.
Oh, 100% agree. I was going to make a point of, I think the U.S. has had more motorsport enthusiast growth in the last 5 years than any other region or country. I mean, everyone always thought, oh, Europe is the main place for racing. But I mean, look, we're getting more F1 races. We're getting, NASCAR is going to more road courses because people like going left and right. Not that NASCAR is wrong, but the excitement of road racing in America and the fact that it's now so accessible. It's not, I got to spend, all this money to go racing. You can go racing in Champ or Lemon or in Lemons with a $500 car in theory, or whatever the points thing they do now. But it's so accessible now that I think this is going to lead to more growth of, rising water, rising tides raises everyone up, which I love that you're working with all the different organizations, because I think it's going to keep the sport alive. It's going to keep our tracks alive. It's going to keep our gas guzzling cars alive, because you can't charge all those race cars. It's impossible.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting 8-hour race,
Oh man, that'd be exciting, huh? Everyone's gonna sit in pit lane for an hour.
Yeah. Because you couldn't. A Tesla could never run an endurance race. You'd have to have 4 of them, or 8 of them, 10 of them.
Well,
not batteries, cars.
Started.
It is coming though.
I know
it's coming.
It is.
And it's something that I've certainly had on my radar and I'm interested in. And I think what that's going to do, to kind of get off the WRL topic, but that's fine. That's going to do is it's going to bring back, I think, at least my hope, what it used to be in the 30s, 40s, 50s at Le Mans when you were, or to the Targa, or, you know, any of these races where like finishing was, all you had to do was finish and you could finish well. And then, you know, the engineering and everything, it's going to be like a total rebirth of that sort of thing, because now, like we were talking about earlier, so many of these cars are so reliable. They have so much redundancy, like the mechanical aspect, which was such a huge part of the sport and still is in Champ Car and Lemons. But at the pro levels for so long, and now, you know, there's very little of that because no manufacturer wants to be the one that breaks, and no manufacturer wants to be the one that has an engine failure. So you just don't see it. And I do think with electric car racing, the developments that are going to happen to charging or battery swapping or whatever it is, you're going to see some crazy ingenuity. You know, it's going to bring the danger back into the sport a little bit. Not that that's something we want to do, but
see someone get electrocuted on pit lane.
It's just like the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen, and you've got these, you know, you're driving this giant lithium bomb. So, you know, interested to see how all that goes.
I mean, I have this picture in my head of someone swapping a battery and getting electrocuted and going like 30 feet backwards.
Right. You know, exactly.
So to that, so Lemons has a prize that whoever is the first person to come race in their series win the overall in it's either electric or hybrid vehicle. There's a $50,000 purse on it, if I remember correctly.
Really?
Yeah.
Now the hybrid I could see. The hybrid I could see because you don't have to charge it. It's an assist, right?
Yeah. So let me pull it up.
So I wonder about a Volt. One of the things that I've always thought was really cool were the cars like the Volt, and then also the the Fisker Karma, where the gas motor didn't drive the wheels; it only drove the generator.
Yep.
And then I don't know if you
BMW i3 did the same.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen the somebody took a Tesla and put like a 5,000 watt generator in the back and extended the range to like, I don't know what it was, 1,000 miles, but that was kind of funny. So that might be the answer.
So it's got to be an EV. So they've got a Lemons electric class that they're trying to get going.
Okay.
And the first all electric vehicle to win a Lemons race overall will be paid 1 million nickels, and that equates to 50 grand.
1 million nickels.
In nickels.
You get a million nickels.
Yeah, but how long is the Lemons race?
So the one at Road Atlanta is they do it in 3 parts. So Saturday is 8 hours, and then there's like a Saturday or Sunday morning that's 2, and then the final 5 hours after the quiet hour.
Man, it'd have to be such a perfect storm, literally maybe a storm, and you're just puddling for 8 hours to get the range, and then you recharge. I mean, it'd be, but hey, good for them. I mean, someone's going to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's exciting to me about it. You know, I know not everybody's excited about it. I can't say that I spend a lot of time watching Formula E or anything like that. But I think it's going to become, you know, it's going to happen. It just is. But if you can get these manufacturers on it and get, you know, Tesla and Ford and GM throwing just crazy money at racing, whether it's electric or otherwise, you know, it's still going to be good. So,
well, I think even with the introduction of this new, the GTP class in IMSA, you know, it's a hybrid, but it's the start, right? You know, they still have a motor, they still have an ICE, but it is exciting. So RJ, I want to wrap up with, where do you see WRL by 2027? So, you know, 4 years of growth. What are your goals? Where do you see it?
So I guess if we're talking 2027, we bought the series in 2019, or the other half of it. So we've been about 4 years. So it's another 4 years. So we're in the middle. You know, that's an interesting question, but I think what we're going to see is, my focus anyway, is not any sort of massive shakeup to anything. I think that's one thing as a competitor, as somebody who's worked as a mechanic and everything. Too many changes too quickly tend to make things really hard on teams, especially teams who are invested and developed a platform. So I don't see any major changes to the racing product outside of, you know, continuing to follow data and tighten things down. And for me, I'm like when I'm up there, I'm cheering for everybody, like literally every team. I'm cheering for everybody, because what I want to see is close racing and who finishes. You know, when I watch qualifying times and we pull up the qualifying numbers, and I've got the top 10 in GTO within, 0.4 of a second, that makes me feel good. And you've got a V8 Miata in there and Porsches and all this stuff. So just a kind of progressive continuation of that. But I do, back to the spectator thing, I think that's something I want to continue to grow and develop. I've, like I said, I've followed Grid Life, and I certainly don't want to just copy anybody, but I like that they add more to the weekend that brings more people in. And that's something that we're going to start trying to look at, just to continue to get people involved in the series. I want to go to a couple, add some more tracks. The West Coast has been on our radar for a long time. It's just making the jump out there, and we keep finding things that we need to work on, the core product, and making sure we don't abandon what we are doing well and the customers we have now in pursuit of new customers. So every year we've said, hey, let's go do a race out West, and it just hasn't been the right time. So I think, in the next year or two, we'll probably see that, and probably an expansion over there. But, as far as other things go, improving our broadcast coverage and things like that, which it's gotten exponentially better. We've upgraded to 5G devices now. So if you're watching the WRL broadcast, the coverage from the external cameras is night and day difference. So yeah, there are a lot of things that we're trying to do, but ultimately competitive racing and consistency is kind of the goal. So hopefully nothing besides, making our customers happy.
Well, you have no problem selling out.
Yeah, no kidding.
Your events. I mean,
the race before the race.
The race before the race. Yeah, because what's your average sellout right now? You're selling out what? Under.
That's a really interesting question and problem, and I know we're trying to wrap up, but to touch on it, because I think it's important to a lot.
We got plenty of time. We can keep going if we need to. I'll just.
He can always edit what he needs to edit.
I can always edit out.
Edit this out. Yeah. No, but the. I have a lot of people, they're like, oh, it's a good problem to have, but it's still a problem. And I hate that, people are there eager to go racing. Like, and I always try to put myself back in their shoes. Like, if I've been planning since, October that I want to go racing in July with WRL at this race, and then you get waitlisted. But the reality that we have is, there's so much going on. A lot of these teams and people are racing in other series. You're looking at 4 drivers plus a bunch of crew and the car. All those stars have to align to get to one of these races. So what we see over and over again is a sellout really quickly, a handful of teams on the wait list. And even in the case of Barber, we had like 25 teams on the wait list. But by the time we get to the race, we've gotten everybody in. At Barber, we had 30 cancellations, and those ranged from COVID to parts availability. There's a million reasons why that would happen. And we still started the race the weekend with 56 cars at a 60 car capacity. But what we're seeing over and over again is that we're getting everybody into these races. There is just this fear of not being able to get in that drives a lot of anxiety, and I think forces those races to sell out immediately, and also drives the cancellations because people are signing up thinking maybe I can do that, or maybe I can get out of this wedding, or maybe, whatever.
Runaway bride, I got to race.
Yeah. Maybe this relationship won't work out before we get there. So the reality is we're really getting a lot of people in. I think the challenge for me is conveying that message and making sure people know that. And something I'm going to start doing is kind of like a standby program for the top 5 people who get in. And we're going to give them like a free DE so they can run all day. And then as cars retire, we can take that car that retired that typically wouldn't get a refund, give that car a refund, and then slot that other car in, at that moment, which at least gets you on track. It's not a perfect solution. We did add some races this year. We added the 2 Road Atlanta races, which is a bit of a risk for us, but it was still a really good event. Lots of hype for the GP event in July, which I think is going to be excellent. The GT only event was also very good.
That was awesome.
To have nothing but the GT cars out there is totally different looking.
It was cool.
We're just trying different things, and I don't know that that'll happen again. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But we're just trying different things and following feedback and seeing what we wind up with.
And part of the thing that was, and I'm going to go back to this paddock feel, right? And also back to the spectator. Even before it was technically a spectator event, you could come and spectate. You could walk the paddock, you could do everything. But When's your okay? You had Road Atlanta Spectator with GTO. Are you doing Road Atlanta again, Spectator?
Yep, we'll do Road Atlanta again.
And then Sebring?
Yep, Sebring and New Jersey Motorsports Park for right now.
Nice.
So if you're around for these races, please go spectate. It is, like I said, it's open. You can go, you can walk in the paddock, you can talk to everybody. It is such a cool feel. And especially a place like Road Atlanta where, you can go sit on the hill and just watch the racing for a few hours, bring the family, let the kids run around the big knolls and everything. I mean, it really is it's a great feel, and it's such a fun event. So I'm really happy that y'all are starting to do the spectator events, and I love seeing the growth over the past few years. I've been in the tower and race control with you, helping out on different things, and it's a great team, and I think y'all treat everyone very fairly and very evenly. If you're an IMSA professional racer or if you're brand new to the sport, you're getting the same level of respect and the same, rulings on what happened. You look at the facts, not, really anything else, which I think is super important in all this. But RJ, thank you so much for spending this hour with us. I hope it's been fun. Yeah. And then I guess we'll see you in a few days, probably. Hopefully, if the rain holds off, we'll be out at Road Atlanta. I think Tyler's going to be out there too with some people. So we'll at least see each other probably in a few days. But Tyler, you want to wrap up with anything, or are you good?
No, it's been great, RJ. Thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate it. And you said the big R word, so hopefully that doesn't impede on the weekend. But
I know. Well, unfortunately the forecast is not looking great. But you know what? Sometimes if you will rain dance and we'll wish it out of existence, and it may happen. It's also Road Atlanta. Hundreds of times we've looked at it and it's been, it's supposed to pour, and then nothing comes. So we'll hope for the best. But again, guys, episode 2, Pitbox Social. RJ, thank you so much. And we will see all of y'all next time. Since then, have fun, stay safe on track. Y'all have a good one.
Thanks, guys.